Death, as the galaxy understood it, was supposed to be absolute. Commander Kinth of the Valthic Dominion had witnessed warfare across 17 different star systems. He'd commanded battalions against the crystalline hive minds of the Krell, weathered the psychic assaults of the telepathic Sorvath, and survived 3 separate encounters with the void-breathing Nethari. Each species brought their own flavor of brutality to the battlefield, their own methods of inflicting maximum carnage with calculated precision. Nothing had prepared him for the humans. The remains of Corinth Station sprawled across the landing zone like a broken promise. What had once been a thriving commercial hub now existed only as twisted metal and scorched plasteel, the air thick with the acrid stench of ionized atmosphere and burning polymers. Plasma fire streaked overhead in neon ribbons, painting the smoke-choked sky in shades of violent purple and electric blue. Kinth crouched behind a collapsed support beam, his rifle pressed against his shoulder, 4 eyes tracking movement through the chaos. The Valthic had thought this would be a straightforward engagement. Pin down the human defensive position, overwhelm them with superior numbers, extract the strategic resources from the station's lower levels. Standard operating procedure. Except humans didn't follow standard operating procedures. Contacts moving northeast quadrant. His second-in-command, Tactical Officer Jerix, hissed through the comlink. 3 signatures. No weapons signatures detected. Kinth's mandibles clicked in confusion. Clarify, no weapons. Confirmed, Commander. They're marked as medical personnel. Through the smoke and debris, Kinth watched as 3 figures sprinted across the kill zone. They wore armor marked with brilliant crimson crosses, insignias that should have guaranteed their safety under every galactic convention of warfare. The medics moved with practiced efficiency, zigzagging through incoming fire as plasma bolts carved molten furrows in the ground around their boots. One of them, a stocky human male with a pack that seemed almost as large as his torso, slid to his knees beside a fallen soldier. The wounded human was screaming, his entire left side a charred mess of exposed tissue and melted combat plating. "Not happening, Rodriguez," the medic shouted, his voice carrying across the battlefield with startling clarity. "You promised me you'd make it to my daughter's birthday party, remember?" Kinth watched in morbid fascination as the medic's hands became a blur of motion. He produced a cylindrical device, pressed it against the wound, and a thick grey foam exploded outward, expanding and hardening within seconds. The soldier's screams cut off abruptly, his body going rigid. "That's the good stuff kicking in," the medic muttered, already pulling out a second tool, something that looked like a combination of a surgical laser and a welding torch. "Now hold still while I make sure your insides stay inside." A Valthic sniper, positioned on a building remnant 200 meters distant, lined up his shot. Kinth could see it happening, could see the telltale shimmer of the targeting laser painting a dot on the medic's back. Before Kinth could shout a warning, the crack of the hypervelocity round took the Valthic's head straight off. The sniper's body tumbled backward off his perch. "Eagle eye to ground team," a calm female voice crackled through the human comm channels, somehow audible even through Kinth's monitoring systems. "Nobody touches our docks. Nobody." The medic didn't even look up from his work. "Appreciate it, Kira. Owe you a beer. You owe me 3 beers and that recipe for your wife's lasagna." "Deal." Rodriguez, who by all biological logic should have been dead or dying, groaned and tried to sit up. The medic planted a hand on his chest and shoved him back down with surprising force. "Did I say you could move?" "No, I did not. You move when I tell you to move, got it?" "Doc, my entire side is." "Your entire side is getting fixed by me, which means you sit still and you breathe in that order." The medic jabbed another injector into Rodriguez's neck. "There, combat stims. You're going to feel like you could run a marathon in about 30 seconds. I feel like I could fight God." "You can fight God later. Right now, you're going to take this rifle, find some cover, and provide suppressing fire while I work on Patterson over there." "Clear." Rodriguez staggered to his feet, his movements already steadier, and Kinth felt something cold and primal coil in his stomach. That soldier should have been evacuated. He should have been sent to a medical facility, spent weeks in recovery. Instead, he was combat-ready in under 3 minutes. The medic was already moving, sprinting toward another fallen human, and Kinth noticed something that made his blood run cold. The medic carried a sidearm, a large one. A Krell warrior burst from cover, his chitinous armor gleaming, mandibles spread wide as he charged the medic's position. The human didn't break stride. Without looking up from his approach to the wounded soldier, He drew the pistol and fired 4 times in rapid succession. The Krell's chest plate shattered, and the creature collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs. The medic holstered his weapon and dropped beside the second wounded soldier, his hands already pulling out fresh supplies. "Hey there, Patterson. You look like hell," says the guy who's covered in someone else's blue blood. Patterson wheezed, her face pale beneath the grime and sweat. "Blue blood means not you blood, which means you're doing better than you think." The medic's scanner hummed as it passed over her torso. "Okay, so good news and bad news. Good news is your organs are intact. Bad news is you've got about 4 inches of shrapnel that's going to make things uncomfortable." How uncomfortable are we talking? Like trying to pass a kidney stone made of razor blades uncomfortable. He was already prepping another foam canister. "But you're not dying today, so I'd call that a win." Kinth found himself backing away, his 4 eyes wide, his breathing rapid. This wasn't medicine. This was battlefield necromancy. The humans didn't treat their wounded. They rebuilt them, right there in the killing zone, and sent them back into the fight. Jerex appeared at his side, his rifle forgotten, his posture rigid with barely contained panic. "Commander, we need to reconsider our engagement parameters." "Agreed." Kinth's voice came out as a rasp. "Issue immediate orders. No targeting of medical personnel. Repeat, no targeting of human medical personnel under any circumstances." "Sir, the rules of engagement." "I don't care about the rules." Kinth snapped, his mandibles spreading wide in the Valthic expression of existential dread. "I just watched one of them perform surgery and return fire simultaneously. These aren't healers. They're something else entirely." High Admiral Calrix of the Sorvath Collective observed the human medical corps from the safety of his command ship, his telepathic abilities allowing him to sense the emotional resonance of the battlefield, even from orbit. What he felt made his 3 hearts race, with something he'd never experienced in 2 centuries of warfare. Fear, not the fear of death. The Sorvath had long ago made peace with mortality. This was different. This was the fear of facing an enemy that refused to acknowledge death as a valid outcome. "Analysis," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority through the neural links connecting him to his crew. His intelligence officer, Coordinator Threxis, pulled up holographic displays that made Calrix's skin ripple with unease. The humans maintain a medic-to-soldier ratio of approximately 1 to 15. Standard galactic protocol suggests 1 to 100 as adequate. However, our casualty projections indicate their medical corps reduces combat losses by 73% compared to equivalent forces. 73%, Calrix repeated, his telepathic voice heavy with disbelief. "That's statistically impossible. No medical intervention can prevent battlefield deaths at that rate." "With respect, Admiral, you're applying conventional logic to an unconventional species." Threxis highlighted a section of combat footage. "Observe." The recording showed a human firebase under assault by Sorvath shock troops. The humans were outnumbered 3 to 1, their defensive positions collapsing under concentrated plasma fire. Victory should have been assured within minutes. Then the medics arrived. They came from behind the lines, moving with purpose and precision. One of them, a tall human male with burns covering half his face, pulled a wounded soldier out of a collapsed bunker. The soldier's leg was gone, severed cleanly at the knee by a plasma blade. "You're fine, Turner," the medic said, his voice captured by the surveillance drones. "Legs are overrated anyway. You've got a spare." "Doc, I can see bone. And bone is just nature's scaffolding. Now shut up and let me work." The medic's hands moved with practiced speed, applying pressure to stop the bleeding, injecting coagulants, wrapping the stump in what appeared to be regenerative bandaging. The entire process took less than 90 seconds. Then the medic pulled out a prosthetic. Calrix leaned forward, his disbelief overriding his telepathic discipline. "He's attaching a combat prosthetic in the middle of an active firefight. Watch." The prosthetic clicked into place, neural interface synchronizing with Turner's nervous system in real time. The soldier's eyes went wide, then focused. He tested the artificial leg, the servos whining softly as they responded to his commands. "How does it feel?" the medic asked, already packing up his supplies. "Like I've got a hydraulic press where my knee used to be." "Perfect. That means it's working. Now get back in position. We've got about 15 more minutes of fighting before extraction arrives, and I need you mobile." Turner stood, tested his weight on the prosthetic, then grabbed his rifle and sprinted back toward the defensive line. The entire sequence, from catastrophic injury to combat-ready status, had taken less than 3 minutes. Calrix felt his telepathic sense recall from the implications. This changes everything. Thraxis nodded, his mental signature radiating grim understanding. Admiral, we need to adjust our strategic assessments. If the humans can sustain their fighting forces at this rate, attrition warfare becomes meaningless. We can't outlast an enemy that doesn't stay dead. Then we need to eliminate their medical capabilities. Calrix's mental voice carried the weight of command decision. Target their medical facilities, disrupt their supply chains, remove their ability to perform these interventions. Threxus's mental presence went very still. Admiral, there's something else you need to see, something that happened 3 weeks ago in the Tarantes system. The footage that followed made Calrix wish he'd never asked. The incident at Tarantes station had started as a standard raid. A Sorvath splinter faction, operating outside collective authority, had attacked a human medical convoy. They'd killed the guards, captured the medical personnel, and broadcast their execution as psychological warfare. The response had been immediate and absolute. The human fleet arrived within 6 hours, not to negotiate, not to make demands. They came to extract payment in blood. Calrix watched the footage in mounting horror as human forces systematically dismantled the Sorvath position. But they weren't killing efficiently, they were wounding, deliberately. Precision strikes that disabled rather than destroyed. Plasma burns that cauterized as they cut. Kinetic rounds that shattered limbs without piercing vital organs. The Sorvath fighters, conditioned to expect death in battle, instead found themselves crippled and screaming, watching as human medics moved through the aftermath. Please, one of the wounded Sorvath begged, his telepathic voice broadcast across all channels. Just kill us. A human medic knelt beside him, her face expressionless behind her visor. No, you wanted to see what we do to our wounded. Now you get to live with what you did to ours. She treated his injuries, stabilized his condition, made sure he would survive. Then she moved to the next wounded Sorvath, and the next, saving every single one of them. The surviving Sorvath fighters were left in the ruins of their base, alive and aware, forced to contemplate their survival as an act of punishment rather than mercy. Calrix disconnected from the footage, his mental shields slamming down to protect himself from the emotional resonance of what he'd witnessed. Inform all collective forces. Under no circumstances are human medical personnel to be harmed. Any commander who orders such action will be executed for incompetence. Sir, the humans have weaponized compassion itself. Calrix's telepathic voice carried the weight of terrible understanding. To kill their medics is to invoke a response we cannot survive. Better to accept our losses in honorable combat than face what happens when we cross that line. General Morrigan Hayes stood in the command center of the TSS Endeavour, watching the tactical displays with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent 30 years turning impossible situations into improbable victories. The battle for Orion's Gate was entering its final phase, and by all conventional military analysis, her forces should have collapsed 2 days ago. But her medics wouldn't let that happen. Status report, she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned her rank in blood and determination. Casualties are high, General, but recovery rates are holding steady, her operations officer, Commander James Tully, reported. His face showed the strain of 72 hours of continuous combat, but his voice remained steady. Medical Corps reports they're running low on advanced prosthetics, but they've improvised solutions using salvaged equipment. Improvised solutions. Hayes allowed herself a slight smile. That's diplomatic phrasing for our medics performing miracles with spare parts and sheer stubbornness. Ma'am, you should see this. Tully pulled up a live feed from the front lines. Combat medic First Class Jennifer Wu sprinted through a hail of plasma fire, her medical pack bouncing against her back, her boots finding purchase on treacherous ground that had been churned into a muddy nightmare by hours of artillery bombardment. Ahead of her, Corporal David Ramirez lay pinned under a collapsed support strut, his legs crushed, his face a mask of pain and determination. Wu slid into cover beside him, her scanner already assessing the damage. All right, Ramirez, let's see what we're working with. Doc, I can't feel my legs. That's because your spine is currently arguing with 300 kilos of steel about property rights. Wu's hands moved with practiced efficiency, injecting localized anesthetics, stabilizing the damaged vertebrae with molecular foam. We're going to get you out of here, but I need you to work with me. Can you do that? Yeah, I can do that. Good man. Wu looked up, her eyes scanning the battlefield. Another soldier appeared, firing his rifle one-handed while helping Wu shift the debris enough to free Ramirez. The corporal screamed as sensation returned to his legs, but Wu was already working, her hands steady despite the incoming fire. Spinal integrity is compromised but salvageable, she muttered, more to herself than to Ramirez. Nerve damage is minimal. You're looking at 6 weeks of physical therapy, maybe 8. 6 weeks. Doc, my legs are. Your legs are going to work because I said so, and in this particular field of expertise, I outrank God. Wu finished applying the stabilization harness, then pulled Ramirez to his feet. Now move. We've got 3 more wounded in the next sector who need my attention, and you're mobile enough to walk under your own power. Hayes watched the feed with something approaching pride. Tully, what's the total casualty count from this engagement? Counting wounded returned to active duty. Tully checked his datapad. Approximately 15% sustained injuries requiring immediate evacuation. The rest received field treatment and remained combat effective. And enemy casualties. 83% incapacitation rate. Most of them are still alive. Hayes nodded slowly. The galaxy hadn't figured it out yet, but they would eventually. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their absolute refusal to accept death as an inevitability. General, we're receiving a priority communication from the Torvik Assembly, Tully announced. They're requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations. Tell them we'll agree to talks once all human personnel are accounted for and all wounded on both sides have received medical treatment. Hayes turned back to the tactical display. And Tully, make sure they understand that includes their wounded. Our medics don't discriminate. Tully's expression showed understanding. Yes, ma'am. That ought to send a message. The Torvik Assembly's military commander, War Master Krethix, stood in the negotiation chamber aboard the neutral station, his scaled hide showing patterns of stress and exhaustion. Across from him, General Hayes maintained an expression of professional neutrality. Your terms are acceptable, Krethix said, his translator converting his guttural speech into standard galactic common. But I must understand. Why do you treat our wounded? We were your enemies. Some of them killed your soldiers. Hayes leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled. War Master, humanity learned a long time ago that the worst thing you can do to an enemy isn't killing them. It's making them live with the knowledge that you saved them when they expected death. It's psychological warfare at the most fundamental level. You heal us to punish us. We heal you because that's what we do. Hayes's expression softened slightly. But yes, there's a strategic element. Every soldier we save, regardless of which side they fought on, goes home with a story. They tell their families, their comrades, their leaders. They talk about the humans who refused to let them die, even when they would have let us die. Krethix's scales rippled, a Torvik expression of deep contemplation. You make enemies fear your mercy more than your weapons. We make enemies question whether fighting us is worth the cost, not just in casualties, but in the knowledge that if they harm our medics, we'll rain down consequences they can't imagine. Hayes stood, extending her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Your assembly wanted to test human resolve. You discovered that our medics are the embodiment of that resolve. They don't just heal bodies. They break the enemy's will to continue fighting. Krethix stared at the offered hand, then gripped it carefully. The galaxy will learn this lesson, some through peaceful means, others through painful experience. Let's hope more choose the peaceful option. Hayes released his hand and gestured toward the door. Your wounded are ready for transport. Our medical teams have provided full treatment protocols and supply manifests. If your doctors have questions, they can contact our medical corps directly. As Krethix departed, Tully appeared at Hayes's side. General, final casualty reports are in. Total human losses for the Orion's Gate engagement, 37 killed in action, 212 wounded. And of those wounded, 198 have already returned to duty. The remaining 14 are in recovery, but expected to return within 2 weeks. Hayes closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of grief for the 37 who hadn't made it. 37 soldiers whose medics couldn't reach them in time, couldn't stabilize their injuries, couldn't defy death one more time. Make sure their families receive full honors, she said quietly. And Tully, send a commendation to the medical corps. They earned it. Already drafted, ma'am. I took the liberty of recommending Combat Medic Wu for promotion. Her performance in the field was exceptional. Approved. Hayes opened her eyes, her expression hardening back into command posture. Now let's get our people home. The story of the human medics spread across the galaxy like a virus, carried by survivors and witnesses, recorded in military databases and whispered in the dark corners of mercenary bars. Species that had never encountered humans learned to recognize the Crimson Cross, learned that the small figures sprinting through gunfire were the most dangerous individuals on any battlefield. Some called it supernatural, others called it insanity. A few called it evolution, humanity's natural response to a hostile universe that demanded adaptability above all else. But to the humans themselves, it was simply Thursday. On a dozen different worlds, in 100 different conflicts, the medics continued their work. They charged into fire, they performed impossible surgeries, they rebuilt broken bodies with stubborn determination and cutting-edge technology. They carried weapons because sometimes healing required fighting. They ignored the rules of engagement because saving lives took precedence over military doctrine. And when their soldiers fell, when death came calling with plasma fire and kinetic rounds, the medics looked death in its metaphorical face and said the same thing every time. Not today, not ever. Because humanity had learned long ago that the greatest act of defiance wasn't destroying your enemy. It was refusing to let them destroy you. It was turning death itself into just another obstacle to overcome, another challenge to face with determination and dark humor. The medics never died because they wouldn't allow it. And more importantly, they wouldn't allow anyone else to die either. That was the message that echoed across the stars, carried by traumatized enemy soldiers and grateful allies alike. That was the lesson the galaxy learned, written in blood and sealed with surgical foam and emergency prosthetics. You could fight humanity's soldiers and have a chance of winning. You could outmaneuver their tactics, counter their weapons, exploit their weaknesses. But the medics were different. They were the manifestation of humanity's fundamental refusal to accept the universe's rules. They were doctors and warriors, healers and fighters, saints and sinners, all rolled into one blood-soaked package. And if you harmed them, if you dared to cross that line, you didn't just face humanity's military might. You faced something far worse. You faced their absolute commitment to making sure everyone survived to remember what you'd done. General Hayes stood on the observation deck of the Endeavour, watching the stars stream past as the ship made its way back to Earth. Behind her, the medical bay hummed with activity, her medics treating the last of the wounded, performing routine checkups, preparing for whatever came next. She thought about the soldiers who'd survived because of those medics. The lives saved, the families spared grief, the futures preserved. She thought about the enemies who'd learned that humanity's capacity for healing exceeded their capacity for violence by orders of magnitude. And she smiled, because somewhere out there in the black, another conflict was brewing, another battle would be fought, another group of soldiers would face impossible odds. And the medics would be there, sprinting through the fire, defying death with every breath, saving lives because that's what they did. That's what they would always do, because the medics never died. They just got more determined.